Rising above the rolling hills of Massachusetts, its imposing Gothic spires once visible for miles, Danvers State Hospital's silhouette dominates the collective memory of the region. Shrouded in fog and legend, the asylum remains the subject of countless whispered tales, rumors of cruelty, dark experiments, and restless spirits echoing through the remains of crumbling corridors. To many, Danvers is more than a building. It's a symbol, a nexus of real-world horror, medical infamy, and chilling supernatural lore. When Danvers State Hospital first opened its doors in 1878, it was seen as a beacon of hope, a solution to the mounting crisis of mental illness in 19th-century America. Designed by renowned architect Nathaniel J. Bradley, the hospital embodied the ideals of moral treatment, fresh air, natural light, and compassionate care. Its sprawling Kirkbride plan, an ornate, bat-winged structure, represented optimism in an era that offered little for the afflicted. But as history would soon reveal, hopes for a humane asylum gave way to nightmarish reality. Within mere decades, the institution buckled under the weight of overcrowding and underfunding. By the early 20th century, Danvers housed nearly double its intended population. Once broad wards now overflowed, patients jammed together, their pleas for relief often met with apathy, or worse, brutality. In these cramped halls, medical experimentation flourished, giving rise to infamous treatments such as insulin coma therapy, electroconvulsive shock, and the most controversial of all, the prefrontal lobotomy. It was within Danvers' stone walls that the prefrontal lobotomy found its so-called birthplace. Medical staff, desperate for answers, eagerly embraced this radical procedure in the hope it would transform chaotic minds. Patients, some violent, others merely depressed, underwent this surgery in the hopes of a cure. Yet, more often than not, the results were tragic. Docility born from irreversible damage, personalities erased, families left shattered. The corridors witnessed scene after scene of anguish and defeat, a far cry from the ideals on which Danvers had been founded. Outside the treatment rooms, conditions deteriorated to the extreme. Staff, outnumbered and overwhelmed, resorted to questionable measures: restraints, solitary confinement, neglect. Stories circulated of patients chained to beds for days, meals forgotten, illnesses untreated. Letters home painted a picture of isolation and horror, a place where hope withered, replaced by despair. As the decades dragged on, public awareness of Danvers's appalling conditions began to grow. A series of investigations in the mid-20th century exposed the reality lurking behind the asylum's menacing stone facade. Newspapers printed accounts from former patients and families, tales of starvation, unsanitary conditions, and punitive discipline. Reformers entered the fray, demanding change, but the institution itself proved resistant to transformation. Generations came and went, each leaving their spectral mark on Danvers's ancient stones. But it isn't only tales of medical infamy or social neglect that give Danvers its infamous aura. Over time, the hospital became synonymous with the supernatural, a magnet for stories of the unexplained. Local legends tell of ghostly apparitions drifting through empty hallways, disembodied cries echoing from sealed cells. Staff members reported cold spots and flickering lights. Even after the hospital's closure, thrill-seekers and investigators tell of sensations of being watched, of fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures, of doors slamming in the dead of night. First-hand accounts paint a chilling portrait. A former night nurse recalls hurrying through the basement tunnels, her footsteps muffled by an icy breeze, only to hear a faint voice whisper her name from a locked storeroom. A group of urban explorers, years after the last patient had left, described finding children's toys arranged in a circle in an otherwise empty ward. As they turned to leave, they heard the unmistakable sound of laughter behind them, though the halls were deserted. Parapsychologists searching for rational explanations left shaken, forever changed by what they could not understand. But perhaps the most common experience reported by visitors and former inhabitants alike is a feeling of overwhelming sadness, Standing among Danvers' decayed walls, many claim, it's impossible not to sense the emotional residue of decades of desperation, pain, and trauma. It's as if the collective suffering of thousands remains suspended in the air, a shroud cities of the living can neither explain nor dispel. For decades, Danvers State Hospital's reputation grew, fueled by popular culture and media. Horror films drew on its haunted allure. Novels set stories of madness and murder within its maze-like halls. The asylum's image, its steep roofs, arched windows, and fortress-like towers, became shorthand for all that was sinister in America's approach to mental health. The hospital's legacy, for better or worse, transformed from a vision of hope to a monument of dread. Yet, beyond the legends, a continuum of real lives can be traced through the decades, patients crushed by stigma and inadequate care, staff endeavoring to help in a system too vast for reform, families mourning the loved ones they lost to the anonymity of its wards. In the artifacts left behind, scrawled notes, abandoned wheelchairs, records forgotten in dusty file rooms, one can hear the echoes of voices silenced by time. Even in ruination, Danvers continues to fascinate. Urban explorers wove their way through sagging corridors and water-stained ceilings, documenting evidence of graffiti, collapsed staircases, and rooms frozen in decay. Among the debris are relics of daily life, tattered uniforms, old photographs, jars of unidentifiable medications, sifting the boundary between the living and the dead. It's a place suspended, haunted equally by what happened and what is imagined. Why then does Danvers hold such sway over the imagination? Part of the answer lies in its staggering contradictions. Envisioned as a haven, it devolved into a maze of suffering. Designed for healing, it became associated with experimental abuse. Intended as a refuge from the world, it became the stuff of nightmares projected onto its every window and wall. In the collective consciousness, Danvers is both a cautionary tale and an unfinished story, a place where fear, pity, and morbid curiosity blur together. Perhaps it's also because, for all the stories, Danvers remains unknowable. Its records are incomplete, its tunnels labyrinthine, its chambers littered with clues but never the full truth. Was the hospital truly the site of hauntings, or are reports of the supernatural merely echoes of real horror, dramatized and amplified by time? Were the doctors villains or visionaries trapped by their era's limitations? These questions linger, unresolved, as persistent as the legends themselves. In 1992, Danvers State Hospital closed its doors for the last time. The state moved its remaining patients to newer, more modern facilities, and for a while, Danvers stood vacant. A maze of empty rooms, shattered glass, and graffiti-covered walls. Security could not keep out thrill-seekers, artists, and would-be ghost hunters, all drawn by the promise of mystery and terror. Fires, vandalism, and weather hastened the asylum's decline. As the community debated what to do with the looming relic, developers ultimately razed much of the building, erecting apartments where its spires once rose against the sky. Only fragments of the original structure remain. Yet the memories and legends persist. For many, Danvers will always be more than a ruin. It's a reminder of how easy it is for good intentions to go awry, for systems to devour those they're meant to save, for real suffering to twist into myth. It is, in a sense, haunted not only by ghosts, but by history itself. To visit Danvers State Hospital, even as it exists only in photographs and scattered stones, is to confront uncomfortable truths about the human condition. The architecture, now largely erased, cannot contain the stories still attached to it, stories of misery and hope, loss and endurance, horror and humanity. For those who walk where the wards once were, it's as if time folds in on itself. Somewhere a nurse's hurried step, a patient's anguished whisper, a doctor's weary sigh lingers. Somewhere a door creaks open, or closes forever. And when the mist settles over the hill, the outline of Danvers returns, if only for a moment. A warning, a mystery, a legend that refuses to be laid to rest. No matter where you stand on the spectrum of belief, skeptic or seeker, historian or ghost hunter, Danvers exerts a magnetic pull. It's the place where nightmares were born, but also where the marginalized once dreamed of healing. This dichotomy is what haunts us most, the knowledge that places like Danvers exist not only in shadows, but as monuments to the failings and aspirations of an entire era. So as you ponder the tales of lobotomies and lost souls, of spectral screams and silent misery, remember that every haunted corridor was once a hallway of hope. Every ghost story is shaped by real pain, every legend rooted in the soil of history and longing. In these echoes we find not only chills and shudders, but a reflection of what it means to be human, and of how the past continues to haunt us, whether or not you believe in ghosts. The legacy of Danvers State Hospital endures, as a warning, as a mystery, and as an invitation to never forget those who lived and lost within its walls.